Today I'm going to explain how retirement planning tools are ruining American retirements. Every year I spend hundreds of hours helping my clients interpret financial plan data so that they can get the most satisfaction out of the wealth that they have accumulated. Online retirement planning tools like RICP, New Retirement, or Empower play a major role in most retirees' retirement decisions and will likely play an increasingly important role in Americans' retirement planning efforts in the coming years. Unfortunately, there are some major pitfalls to be aware of when using probability of success or Monte Carlo-driven retirement planning tools. These pitfalls often lead to retirees retiring far later than they otherwise could, as well as spending far less of their wealth than they appropriately could. Now, at Peak Financial Planning, it's my belief and my mission that you have worked hard to save so that you can not only have a stable retirement, but also a maximally enjoyable retirement. So in today's podcast episode, I'm going to be exploring the pros and cons of probability of success-based retirement planning tools and ultimately explaining the place we believe they should hold in modern-day retirement planning. So it's important to begin by defining probability of success-based retirement planning tools. So these are online financial calculators that present spreadsheet data in easy-to-digest visual reports, typically reports that rely on a probability of success metric, or otherwise known as a Monte Carlo score. This is usually a score between 1 and 100 where a bunch of scenarios are run on some input data, and what's given to the consumer or the user is a grid or a dial that gives you a score between 0 and 100 that tells you the probability of your not running out of money while still alive, which means living till the end of life and still having a pool of assets to draw from. And so that's what a financial planning tool does. The question now is, what is the purported purpose of a probability of success-based financial planning tool? The purpose is threefold. The first is to create clarity and allow more confidence in retirement. You can think of this as if you had a huge range of data and you needed to make a good decision about how to retire and when, and you were paralyzed into being unable to do so. Well, a probability of success retirement planning tool summarizes that vast range of data and gives you a nice, easy to read 0 to 100 score that can hopefully reduce some friction and allow a more confident retirement decision. The second benefit of a retirement planning tool or a probability of success-based tool is to put a better tool in the hands of consumers. For too long, consumers, just like you watching this video or listening to this podcast, have been gated from great financial advice. Either you had to do it on your own with very complicated formulas or spreadsheets or maybe even some coding knowledge, or it was very expensive in the form of having to go through very restrictive financial advisors or financial planners. And ideally, these Monte Carlo or probability of success-based tools are simple enough to use, effective enough, that they put better tools in the hands of the consumer, which leads to the third benefit, which is that it empowers individuals to do their own retirement planning if they wish to. So personally, I believe these are all extremely admirable goals if they could be achieved responsibly. And the core question I ask is, can these tools provide more benefit than the risk they might introduce? And this is the type of question we should ask of any tool. Does it provide more benefit than the possible risk that might be introduced? One of the cases I'm going to make in this video is that I don't actually believe they provide enough benefit in excess of the risk, because much of the risk is not disclosed. And so the purpose of this podcast is to explain or put disclaimers of the risks that are inherent to using probability of success retirement planning tools. And then with those disclaimers in place, people can use them responsibly and make good decisions using them the way they're intended. Now, I'm going to start this video with two of my own disclaimers before I get into what I believe are the pros and cons of these tools and what you should use to supplement them. The first disclaimer is that I personally and in my practice use, appreciate, and respect Monte Carlo or probability of success-based financial planning tools. In this podcast, I'm going to explain how and why we fit those into our process. And I'm not saying to any of you watching or listening to this to wholesale write off probability of success-based tools. I'm simply trying to educate so that we can restore a healthy respect for a tool and a process that, in my opinion, deserves more respect and more caution than it is currently receiving. The second disclaimer I make is that there will be obvious exceptions to the claims I'm going to make in this video. A certain subset of people, in fact, many of you listening or watching may fall into this bucket, will have the intuition and the discipline to build more detailed models, to look beneath the surface of these tools, and may also have the combination of risk tolerance, wisdom, and experience to properly use retirement planning tools and obtain excellent outcomes. My claim in this podcast is simply that this is a small subset and far from the majority of the retiring population, and so I therefore see it as part of my mission to help illustrate and explain some of the underlying risks. Now, my opinion, unfortunately, what probability of success financial planning tools actually do is that, number one, they mislead people with overly simplified reports that we often trust and rely upon without actually knowing or exploring what is beneath the surface of those reports. For example, what does a Monte Carlo or probability score of 75 mean? What about 80? Those numbers tell us a directional idea of how likely we are to not run out of money, but they don't really tell us anything about the underlying risk. Where is the risk? Is it while I'm young? Is it while I'm old? Where will I spend more? Where will I spend less? We have to actually go in and dig beneath the surface. And while some people may do that, they might have that intuition, many people will not. They'll just take the summary and accept it and change their real-time, real-life behaviors based on that probability of success score, and that can be dangerous. The second problem that these create is that they create lazy plans and lazy planners. And I'm not specifically talking about DIY planners like you watching this at home, or even financial planners. I'm talking about everybody. The problem is that because the tool does the heavy lifting, it does all the computations, it automatically builds the spreadsheet, it automatically does the formulas. It takes that responsibility away from us as planners, both me as a professional planner, but maybe you as a do-it-yourselfer who wants to do it themselves. And we therefore become less competent and less skilled as actual planners. I can give you a couple easy examples. Let's say that you're trying to make a good decision about Social Security. Why would you go and run a Social Security spreadsheet analysis of what the effect of claiming at 70 versus 62 is if the tool just tells you that the optimal option is to claim at 70? Now, what I know as someone who does financial planning every day is that there are vast differences in why you might want to claim younger and why you might want to claim later. And those differences don't always reflect in the probability of success outcome. The problem is because the tool tells us what to do, we don't always go in and verify, and we atrophy our skills at evaluating critically some of these more nuanced or textured decisions. The third problem that I like to illustrate, and this is what in my opinion is the most pernicious of the problems that are caused by probability of success retirement planning tools. The third problem here is that these tools convince consumers that they can quote unquote become their own doctors. And so in real life, there are many areas of our life where we know that we should delegate to specialists, a doctor being the best obvious example. Yes, I can go on WebMD, I can type in symptoms that I'm having, and I can try to diagnose my own medical ailment. The problem is the risk and the consequence of doing that are so high that I know I should rely upon someone who has many years of schooling, education, mentorship, experience, intuition, and wisdom that is all kind of created through the process of becoming that doctor to give me that medical diagnosis. And there are many other careers that we think of this in our lives, such as being a CPA, a tax accountant, a lawyer. And in my opinion, the same thing holds true for financial planners or financial advisors. Done properly, these are really complex matters. There's lots of nuance and the risk and consequence are high. And financial planning tools, by making things too easy and removing too much decision-making friction, can oftentimes mislead us into thinking we can become our own doctor. Now, I'll give a couple illustrations of where I see this and where I believe this to be the case. I'm going to illustrate this through an analogy that hopefully will communicate this well. So the main problem with a probability of success retirement planning tool, but also one of its benefits, is that it does give good, accurate, directional information about where you're headed based on the data you input into the tool today and whether you're likely to live and not run out of money while alive. That is generally accurate. It's directionally accurate, but the problem is it doesn't give you any of the details about the step-by-steps to get there, the prioritization, what's the most important and impactful of the action items you need to do to get there. It also doesn't give you contingency plans, the if-then scenarios of what do I do if this happens so that I do this. And a common analogy that would make a lot of sense in my opinion is Google Maps. Imagine if you used Google Maps as a tool and you could put your destination in the map, but Google Maps did not spit back out the turn-by-turn directions, the traffic or real-time road closure reports, or the third, which is the updating in real time, updating and revised directions if there is traffic or road closures, right? Those are the really valuable parts of Google Maps. Google Maps isn't that valuable if all it does is tell you where the destination is, right? And to illustrate this even further, it doesn't really follow human behaviors either, because most of us, if we were to use Google Maps and plug in the destination, but it didn't give us any of that valuable data, the turn-by-turn directions, the real-time tracking of your route, and the updates and contingency plans, you wouldn't use Google Maps. It wouldn't be all that valuable. But that's just exactly what probability of success retirement planning tools do. They're really good at illustrating the destination, but they're not good at prioritizing the step-by-step directions, the real-time tracking, or providing clear contingency plans. And as I said, this doesn't really follow actual human behavior. You wouldn't use Google Maps if it didn't provide all those real-time data, and yet we use probability of success retirement plans as though it does provide that information when in fact it doesn't. Now, the central case I'd make here is that to compensate for not having a clear understanding of these contingency plans, of the action items, the turn-by-turn directions and the real-time tracking, what ends up happening for most people is they use a probability of success retirement planning tool, and then they end up delaying retiring in pursuit of a higher probability of success, oftentimes because we don't really understand what that probability of success indicates. So the central premise of this podcast, what I believe makes retirement possible, is that having a clear understanding and documentation of robust contingency plans, turn-by-turn directions, and real-time tracking, many people would actually retire earlier and spend more of their wealth because they would be reassured by the possibility of doing all that successfully because they would have tools in their toolbox rather than just having a destination, which is really just a wish and a dream, right? So we actually have practical real-time tools rather than just kind of having a direction to travel. Most people either delay retirement and waste years that they can't get back, or spend less in retirement and lose out on the satisfaction and joy that the wealth you've accumulated should provide you, when in actuality, they could have both stability and satisfaction if they had the right turn-by-turn directions, real-time monitoring, and contingency plans in place. And so how do we at Peak Financial Planning incorporate probability of success tools into our retirement planning efforts? The first way we do that is they're great for use as a baseline. It's really excellent to plug in the information and have a score between 0 and 100 that tells you the likelihood that you will live to the end of your life and not run out of money. Super, super useful as a baseline. But beyond that, we need supplementing tools that actually provide not just the destination, but the actual turn-by-turn directions. And so at our practice, we use 4 other tools. The first of those other tools is we use a dynamic spending tool, something like Income Labs. Income Labs is a dynamic spending tool that ties your spending year by year to the variability of your portfolio value. What that means is it gives you very simple to follow rules that say you can/should spend this amount of money as long as your portfolio is valued between X dollars and Y dollars. When the portfolio goes above Y dollars, you can increase your spending by this amount. When your portfolio goes below X dollars, you should decrease your spending by this amount. It's effective because it actually takes into account real-time portfolio values and gives you real contingency plans based on that. The second critical tool I believe that we should use to supplement probability of success retirement plans are spreadsheets, like a distribution rate table. That distribution rate table is where you export the dollars that you would expect to spend each year in retirement. You compare that to your start of the year portfolio value, and it spits you out a distribution rate, which is the percent of total retirement assets you would be spending or distributing each year. And then what you could do with that distribution rate table is evaluate where in your retirement are the distribution rates the highest, and therefore where will your distribution rate risk be highest, and then how can you compensate and adjust for that? I have several videos on my YouTube channel that show this visually, so if you're listening to this by audio or even watching this on YouTube, there's no visual aids for this here. You can go look at any of the case study videos I've done on my YouTube channel to see me demonstrate what I call a distribution rate table. Now, there's a third tool, and the third tool is very simple. This is to use real-time spending tracking tools like EveryDollar or QuickBooks to track your spending. Retirement is all about spending, and the probability of success tools do not monitor real-time spending. They don't implement that data in real time. And so those probability of successes are really just snapshots. They're just a point-in-time percentage-based read, but they don't incorporate your real-life data. And your spending in retirement or using a spending tool in retirement is like tracking your blood pressure, your heart rate, and your weight. It's like tracking the most vital of your health measures. The fourth and final tool we recommend using is some kind of better risk and reward measures for retirement investment portfolios. So instead of using only asset allocation and rate of return as primary measures of retirement portfolio construction and success, we highly recommend using things like standard deviation, beta, market correlation, and maximum drawdown, just to mention a few. Because the more measures you have, the better your data will be, and these will support the actions and decisions you should make with your portfolio once your retirement plan is built. And it's just another way to produce contingency plans for your portfolio. I'd like to wrap this podcast up by asking you to ask yourself a very important question. If you use or have used a probability of success retirement planning tool, and you have a high probability of success, let's say above 70%, and you're age 62 or older, why have you not retired? What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for a specific percent or number on the probability of success dial? Are you waiting for a specific dollar amount in savings? Is there something that those future goals, your future probability of success or your larger dollar amount in savings will mean to you if you actually achieve them? I'd like you to consider whether higher probability of success or more money are actually what you're looking for, or if what you're looking for are turn-by-turn directions, real-time tracking, and contingency plans that allow you to retire earlier if you'd like to, spend more money in retirement if you'd like to, and know that you're doing it responsibly because you have monitoring and backup plans in place. I'll add links in the show notes below in the description to this video on YouTube, but also in the show notes to the podcast, to respective videos that I've done on YouTube that show visual aids detailing the 4 tools that I've just recommended using in conjunction with the probability of success retirement planning tools. So make sure to check out the notes if you're interested. Anyhow, hopefully this video or podcast helped illustrate the pros and cons of modern retirement planning tools. And as a call to action to you, I'd encourage you, if you'd like to retire earlier or spend more in retirement and do so confidently, I highly encourage you to explore supplementing your probability of success-based retirement planning tool with some additional tools. Thanks for your time and attention. If you liked what you heard in this podcast or in this video, you can see more about how we help our clients retire confidently and synthesize this information on our website at www.thepeakfp.com. And you can watch the supplemental videos I mentioned on our YouTube channel at The Peak FP on YouTube. Thanks for your time and attention.